to another episode of Conversations, where we have the conversations about the people side of things. And specifically, in my experience, there are a lot of people conversations that are missing from the work environment. And so I'm actually really excited for our conversation today because we're going to be talking about something probably not a lot of even individual people are talking about, but I would say maybe a conversation that is just like 0% of the time happening in the corporate workspace. And so I'm really excited to bring this conversation to the light of day for all of our friends who can maybe find new ways to incorporate into your conversations at work and at home. So, for those of you who are joining us live, please let us know that you're here. We would love for you to get into the chat and share your experience, your perspectives, your question on our topic of the day, which is being open to receive. Oh, and I will tell you, when I first met Tammy, my whole concept of open to receive, I don't even know if I could say I had my concept of it because it just wasn't a thing. It wasn't part of the conversation at all until I met Tammy. And Tammy does a lot of coaching and support in this arena. So she is hands down an expert in this arena. And that's why I say, if you have questions, please ask them because you will get useful answers, I promise. Let's start with introductions of Tammy. So Tammy, tell us a little bit about yourself and why this concept of being open to receive is something that's so important to you.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for the introduction, Tracy. And I'm so happy to be on your show. And I feel like I love this music that you started off with. It has changed since the last time I've been here. And so I love it. And just a little bit about me. I'm a body whisperer. I'm a self-love embodiment guide. And I essentially have this proven and unique face and body analysis system to help high achievers uncover subconscious blocks and to emotionally release repressed emotions that are keeping them from creating the health and success that they want and creating that impact and abundance with more balance and ease. So that's what I spend my time doing and what I love. And a bit about for myself about why I even ventured on this open to receive topic obviously starts from my own life, right? Because essentially I used to be a registered nurse and I literally led up to a day where I ended up being wheeled off to emergency in front of all my coworkers at work. I was having chest pain and heart palpitations and having problems breathing. And it was a full-on panic attack. And at that time, essentially, leading up to, I knew that I was burning out and not doing very well. I planned my exit with getting a doctor's note and everything, but I couldn't get myself to let go. And someone might question if it's, is it like, Tammy, why didn't you prioritize yourself? You seem like a very smart, intelligent person, right? And I struggled because it wasn't that I didn't know what I should do. It was that I emotionally couldn't let go. And how many times for us, right? We know what the right thing to do is. And then we struggle to maybe do that thing or put ourselves first, whatever that looks like for us, right? And so for me, that was on a bed of a lot of trauma. I was on a bed of suffering with depression and chronic having anxiety 24/7. So I'm not sure if anyone out there could connect with that, but having it 24/7 was a really harsh thing. And, that led up to my burnout. And I will say that I had to get used to looking good on the outside, and people pleasing. I was that person that got straight A's and university with distinction type person, very much that high achiever wanting to do something. But back then I was doing it based on like, I wanted to feel good enough about myself. Like there was definitely through all the trauma I experienced, there was a lot of worthiness issues. And I like to describe this as like a high functioning anxiety depression, if that makes sense. Like you could hold everything up, keep everything looking good on the outside, but inside it's that worthiness. And no one can tell. No one can tell unless we're willing to open up and ask for help or even admit we have I had a problem. And I think this happens more often than it doesn't. And it's this place that we get used to wearing this mask and becoming someone we're not, and we even forget that we're wearing that mask, and it starts to be part of our identity, and like, well, this is who I am, and we forget who the true self is. So yeah, a lot of my work and my passion is to help someone find this authentic self again. Like, who am I? This is the question that comes up for most of us somewhere along the journey of our life. And I do what I do now because with a face analysis, I get to help people take off this mask. And I believe I'm helping people see themselves again and to really receive themselves for the first time. And this really touches my heart. And every time I do a face analysis inner awakening journey with someone, I just feel like I'm living my purpose, and I am living my purpose. And another thing I would just quickly share is that this open to receive thing, like that, what comes up for me in my story again and again is that I didn't actually awaken myself. I needed someone to actually help me with it, Tracy. We don't know what we don't know. And for me, it was when I had my daughter. She was like 6 months old and lying there on that baby Einstein mat. And for the first time, she intentionally hit one of those hanging toys. And I saw it, but I was just so disconnected from it. And if it wasn't for this nurse that was sitting next to me on my couch in my living room and said, "Oh, did you see that, Tammy?" Right? Then I saw it, but I was so fixated on everything I had to do for this child as a new mother. I just couldn't let it in. And I didn't know that something was wrong. But when that nurse pointed out to me, I realized, man, I'm turning into my mom who left me at 20 days old. I wasn't physically abandoning my daughter, but I was emotionally abandoning her. And so it's so important to come back to this place within us of emotions and feeling, and are we actually letting life in? I wasn't letting my baby in. And this is why I want to help people let themselves in and be open to receive whatever they say they want. And so that was a bit of a long intro, but I really wanted to really highlight why this is so important for me. It's not just a topic to talk about.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, this is why I'm so excited to have you here as a guest, Tammy, because I know your story. And I just think that Kim is sharing in a comment here that she's hearing more and more corporate people speaking of burnout from pushing too hard and not giving the self-care. And this is why I super excited to bring this into the conversation today, because when we go to work, we're still people, right? And I would say in the workspace is one of those places where we put on even a more aggressive mask, should we say, to be like, everything's fine, right? Like, we don't have emotions, we don't have stress, we don't have grief, we don't have any of these things. And let's just talk about the mask for a second, right? So when we're actively putting on that mask, I mean, I have a visualization of what that does to our ability to receive, but what is that doing to our ability to receive when we decide that the mask is the best? Or maybe it's you're at the point in your journey where like you feel like that mask is required. Right? I have to put on this mask to keep myself safe.
Yeah, and I think depending where everyone's at, like we may not even be aware we're wearing the mask because it's been so entrenched. And as do your inner work or just like have things that happen in our life that stimulate our heart, there's you start to realize that that feel right. And because we have this mask on, we have this underlying tendency to repress it, minimize it, make it like tolerate it, and we start to develop these like, I guess, tendencies to really keep pushing it down. And so we're not necessarily even connected to it. But the more we awaken and open within ourselves, we realize something is off. And I find that if you have a huge heart and you really want to make a difference, I find seeing this commonality in my clients is that it becomes a place where it's not okay. And it becomes a really strong inner conflict. That's not right. And yeah, I feel like I need to do this, but it's not right. Like, how do I do something different? And this is where it all starts to happen. And it's being able to make ourselves important to actually even speak up for ourselves. It starts off often with maybe speaking up in certain ways, but then when it gets hard and tough and people maybe say something back to you, or it's so different from the culture of the work, you start to go into the second guessing yourself, doubting yourself, or like, I got to change, I got to leave, whatever that looks like. And so, yeah, it's definitely a bit of a range depending on where you're at, and wherever you're at, it's okay. The importance is that you recognize it, and the first step is recognizing it, right? So,
Right. I'm thinking about these two experiences in my life where it was almost like the straw that broke the camel's back, right? Where you're just like, okay, that's one too many things pushing against what I now call my personal brand, pushing against my personal brand, that I was just like, okay, no, this is not going to happen anymore. So the first one was when I decided to leave my first husband. And I was just like, okay, no, this is it. And this might seem little to everybody else, but this is it for me. And I had a similar experience when I decided to leave corporate. And I was just like, okay, no, I now know that this is a bad decision for me to go here every day. And so every day that I decide to make that decision, I'm making a bad decision on purpose. And like, how long am I going to do that? That sounds crazy. Amber is sharing that she's a self-doubter too. Nice hashtag, Amber. I see what happened there.
yes,
hashtag I'm a self-doubter, hashtag I'm a self-doubter too. All the hashtags going on in the chat right now. And I think it's in those moments for me where there was like, literally there's no doubt, right? Like I get out of that self-doubter mode and say like, okay, now I know this is 100% wrong. I got to go do something else. Do I know what I'm going to do? No, but I know that I have to go do something else. So what are some of those, for some of our peeps that maybe are in the self-doubter mode, right? And have different levels of awareness in terms to the masks that they might be wearing. Is there a way to get that kind of clarity, to get that kind of awareness without getting to the point of straw that broke the camel's back?
Well, yeah, and then thank you for your vulnerability, guys, and just like saying that out in the space, because we've all been there. And yeah, it's like when we are doubting ourselves, it's a place of really choosing, like someone brought up self-care. It's like self-care is not just going to get a massage or facial. It's actually taking the time to like, this is how I feel, and I believe in it. I know I'm right. And it's like being able to hold space for yourself, just like you're holding space for a new level of self-care, not settling for just getting by and feeling better so you could keep on doing the grind. It's using self-care in a deeper way of getting to know yourself. It's like, why is that important to me? Like, why does this feel so true to my soul, my intuition? Like, and really spend time focusing on expanding that belief. Because the more you create space in that, and coming, like listening to Tracy's live today, right? Your focus is going to want to navigate towards that. And that's all the universe's way of supporting us, right? Like maybe it's a conversation, maybe we're driving and there's a song, like things will start to happen. And we might think, oh yeah, that's nothing. But recognize that when you decide and you make it important and you keep building that belief in yourself, that is what is going to build that muscle and strength to take that next step. And of course, it's really helpful to be around people that believe in what you believe in, right? And that's why you're maybe feeling the calling to leave, move on, or maybe like, I really got to find my community. Like, the community that Tracy runs, Business Peeps, is amazing for that, right? And so I would really, that's like one of the first steps. Like, it comes back to how we are relating to ourselves. Are we letting it in? Are we receiving what we know is truth within ourselves? And so that's I gave a few things there. Obviously, community, a little bit of definitely self-care at a higher level, and start noticing what's around you and realize this is support that you're receiving right now, and build on that.
Yeah, this is so interesting because it's making me think of this time. I don't know. I was pretty young. Might have been in university, but it might have even still been in high school. And I remember having this experience where, like, the guy I was dating at the time and my parents seemed to just like completely 100% disagree about everything. And every time I made a decision, one of the parties would say, like, oh, you're just being overly influenced by so and so or so and so. And like, I remember this is so vivid to me, just sitting there thinking once, like, doesn't anybody think I can make my own decisions, right? Like, that I can take information in from multiple parties and then decide what's right for me. And it's sticking out to me as part of this conversation because in that moment, that was me almost celebrating about myself that, and I didn't have a practice of this by any means at the time, but me saying, like, I can do this. Like, I have the confidence in myself to do it. How come no one else believes that I can do that? And it's just like, I would encourage everyone to like look for those types of examples, right? Because I feel like we all have those moments where, again, maybe you don't see it as a straw that broke the camel's back moment, but even that, to me, that's a moment where I was like, okay, no, like, I'm done with other people thinking they know that, or like, I'm just being overly, I can't make it my own. I can, right? And when we can tap into those experiences, those moments, even if there's only like a handful of those moments, you can tap into that and be like, damn, I felt empowered in that moment, right? Those are our opportunities to kind of just remind ourselves that, hey, we might be in self-doubt now, but I haven't always been in self-doubt. I have experiences, I have examples of where I have owned my experience. And how can I, knowing that, I really love your reframe on self-care, Tammy, because I mean, I feel like we talk a lot, and I don't know if I had ever even like really got this before, but like, instead of doing a thing, right, as self-care, just, I mean, like, you're still kind of doing a thing, but what you're actually doing is you're taking ownership of your time to say, like, hey, this is about me. And like, my emotions are valid, my experience is valid. And because a lot of us also, I know I saw a post the other day about gaslighting, right? There's a lot of people who have gaslighting, whether from a societal or cultural or even personal relationship perspective, and being able to like step away from that and say, like, hey, like, I I can feel this, right? Like, I'm angry about this, or I'm frustrated about this, or I need to say something about this, right? Like, treating self-care as that like permission. I talk about permission a lot on this show, right? Like, the permission to give yourself space to be you, whatever that looks like in that minute, because it's not necessarily going to look the same in any given moment, but that where you're at is where you're at, and there's value and worth in that, exactly where you are.
Yeah, it's so true. And I want to just touch base on this other piece here, is that like sometimes, like, like trauma and high emotional events that happened in the past really add to this, right? Because if there's a place where you're used to being not treated well, right? Then that creeps up in the everyday where you you struggle, just like me, to put yourself first and you important. Because your level of self-love hasn't increased. And what I notice is that we keep on letting people mistreat us or situations mistreat us, unless there's a place where we're building that self-love and self-care to a higher ground. And so a lot of people say, why don't we get out of that abusive relationship? It really isn't until there's a shift at an energetic level for you. So really allow yourself to keep being in the space of taking care of yourself, and from an energy of not just doing, from actually a place of loving yourself. Yeah, just want to speak to that. And like, because if you're in this place and you're struggling, like a lot of our upbringing affects everything that's happening right now. And so I just wanted to put that in the space, Tracy.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that Darren is sharing is that self-doubt is a trained response you can alter. And
Mm.
so I'm interested because you brought up the concept of self-love, Tammy. Like, how does self-love come to play as a positive contributor to altering our self-doubt response?
Yeah, like this. I mean, this is definitely a journey in itself, and and this is the thing. It comes back to actually deciding. What I notice is it's really putting that intention is that I recognize this is what's happening, and I'm choosing to change it, and you're putting your foot down. I find that stimulates things to happen faster than anything, and I think for many of us, because we're in that self doubt, we're not stepping into that place of power and just sort of asking and speaking into the space of ourselves, but also to the universe. And that is definitely one of the first steps of inviting more of that in and keeping that focus on it. And I agree, Darren, it is a trained response. Like almost every single conditioned tendency that we have, like whether that's over pleasing, self doubt, over committing, it is just a conditioned response that we're used to cover up things that we don't necessarily want to feel. And so there's places within us that we're the anger might come up, but if we're not used to letting ourselves express anger and speaking up, then we'll want to like snuff that down a little bit and not speak from our power. And so it's actually in that emotional leadership within ourselves that the self-love grows. It's like being able to step aside, like put aside the self-doubt and training ourselves to actually look at the other side of it, which is and I have to say, Tracy, a lot of us don't want to because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to feel those uncomfortable emotions. But I will say that is your personal growth, your self love potential is directly related to how comfortable you could get with being uncomfortable.
Well, and I mean, and that is something that we talk about in a work capacity too, right? Like, I always say there's no comfort in the growth zone and there's no growth in the comfort zone. And so if we're going to go for growth, we have to by default enter the uncomfortable zone. But that there's also two different ways of being uncomfortable. There is an uncomfortable, which is I'm growing, but this feels right. Like it feels like the right direction, and that's where I want to go. Or I'm learning about myself, and it's uncomfortable because I have to uncover past trauma and pain, but I know where I'm going and I can like see that light up ahead. And then there's also discomfort that comes from doing something that's completely misaligned with who you are. And Amber sharing about an example here about how she was having a conversation with an overzealous coach, felt gaslit. And I do think that there's not a lot of people who intend, but also if you don't have a specific intention not to, then these are the types of things that happen. But I just want to also take a moment to celebrate Amber, because Amber, I have known you for, I don't know, 2 weeks. And one of the things I have seen, even in your like last 2 weeks journey, is just like this ability to stand up for yourself and use your voice and say what's real for you and own your experience. And this is not the easiest thing to do, right? It's by nature uncomfortable because we don't build that skill from the time that we're kids to the times that we're adults. And so just quick snaps for Amber, because killing it in sharing her voice. Also, Kim is sharing that I like how you guys talk about building a muscle, right? I've been attending more self-care and learning courses, podcasts, passion breaks, and it helps me feel more confident every time. And this is the point, everyone, is that this is actually the reason why Passion Break, which I think most of you have attended before, but if you haven't attended a Passion Break, it's on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern every Wednesday. It's about taking a break for passion, right? It's giving yourself time, making time for passion every week. And when you make time for your version of self-care, or even learning more about what self-care can look like, when you invest your time in doing the things, that's what builds a muscle. It's the same thing as going to the gym, right? Like I can't get super big biceps if I don't lift weights. Although I've started just like pressing Nicholas, and he's like 40 pounds. So I'm like, oh, this is pretty legit. So you can use your kids as weights if you want to. the point is you still have to go through the activity of building the muscle, and it doesn't go from being non-existent to being strength competition winner worthy in like 5 minutes, right? And I think maybe this is where, in terms of like the physical version of building muscle, right? Like we know that and we can see it, but we can't always see how much we have grown in the last X amount, which is why I wanted to take a moment to celebrate Amber. But Tammy, can you talk a little bit more about the concept of like other people being able to see this and draw things out of you, as well as the concept of community and how that contributes to building the muscle of being open to receive?
All right, I just want to make sure I got it straight. Like how other people see you. Can you say that one more time, maybe in a different way?
Yeah. So what I'm thinking about is like kind of when it comes to me understanding my progress and being open to receive, how does it help to have someone else to reflect that back at you? Maybe that's a coach, maybe that's a community, but having somebody that can reflect it back.
Like, well, it's one thing that like pops up for me to share. Like, if I'm sort of that person looking in on someone to like invite something different from the other person, a lot of it I find has to do with realizing if you're in your head. That is a really big indicator. And I think, as a general, because I know Tracy and us were, and probably people that Tracy attracts in the chat, they're very heart centered people. And so
I was going to say, I believe there's also people in the chat who may or may not be in their head a lot. I won't say who.
Yes.
You know who you are.
Yeah. And it's being able to like realize that, hey, like, I think we got to just take a breath here and just come back to the presence. Cause like when we're in our head, oftentimes like one of the body positions is like, if you're looking sort of up all the time and your head is tilted up, just because some of the bit of a body piece here is like that puts us in our head, and especially when our heads are forward, and it creates a disconnection between our mind and our heart. And I think I wanted to say that just because I'm a body whisperer and I do this. That's something that keeps us locked in our head. And as in my viewpoint, looking in to help someone, maybe invite them to see something different, I often help them come back to the body. Because when we're not in our body, we are in our heads, and they may, it's like it's impossible to really receive into your heart if you're in your head. And yeah, does that make sense? I hope I answered
makes so much sense. And I don't know if this is also relevant, but when I think about the mask, right, I actually think it's almost like a mask we put on our head to protect our heart. And I don't know if everybody has, or if anybody has read the book The Alchemist. If you haven't, I recommend it. It's a very short, enjoyable read. But there's a part in that book where the boy, who's the main character, the boy, is talking to his heart, and he's just learning like how to connect and listen to his heart. And like the heart just starts whispering, right? As soon as he's like, "Oh, I thought you were gone." And the heart's like, "No, I've always been here, never left you. I'm always here for you." And he was like, "But there was like so many times where I asked you for help with things and you were just quiet." And he was like, and the heart says, I'm obviously paraphrasing here. You should read the book to get the actual synopsis. But the heart says, every time I told you what I thought, it would hurt you. And so I started to be silent because I don't want to hurt you. And it's just, again, one of those things that like really resonated with me, because I feel that so deeply, right? That our desire to take care of ourselves and to love ourselves is always there. But because our brain and our mask now that's on our head has been like, no, shh, 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 shh. And then you like feel something and it makes you upset or angry or sad or any of those things. So heart just says, I'll just be quiet. I'll be here. I'll always be here for you, but like, I don't want to hurt you either. It's just a really interesting perspective on like, how do we break this, it's all I'm feeling like the mask isn't actually in between our heart, but like, yeah, if we're always too much in our head, then our heart is just being silenced actively. And this is about a practice of breaking this disconnect down so that all of the pieces of us, that's why I love the concept of embodiment, so that all of the pieces of us are communicating together. Okay, so I think I'm going to go to the chat quickly before I switch gears, because I'm going to switch gears. So Darren was agreeing this thought of like a trained response lends us to keep looking for answers. And it always starts as uncomfortable, but it gets easier. Yes. And it doesn't matter how long you wait. It's going to be uncomfortable, right? So it can be uncomfortable today, or it can be uncomfortable 3 years from now. But either way, it's going to be uncomfortable. There's no amount of training or learning or experience that we can get that is going to make this type of experience less uncomfortable. So it's really just about owning it and being like, okay, discomfort, here I come. I'm coming to get you.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to add on that, Tammy, before I want to talk about like how this like brain heart connection happens and how work environments to support that. But
Okay.
yeah, anything else you want to say on the like uncomfortableness before we go there?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that it's that realizing that a lot of us are in the space of having that facade and identity that we're not even aware, like, and sometimes it's like we're aware of it, but we're not listening to that small piece of the heart. And that's where, we're continuously doubting. And I'll say it this way: it's like abandoning yourself, your truth, and it's and the more we're allowed to be we allow ourselves and give ourselves permission to be more uncomfortable consistently, that's when that voice becomes louder. And so I just wanted to add that piece, because there's a lot of people out there is that they know, but and then they're not necessarily, they don't know how to come back here. And so I'll just finish with that.
I would say that I fell into that category for the longest time, and probably still even partially fall into that category, because I love learning and I love all these concepts, but then all of that is in my brain, right? And like my brain logically understands it. My brain understands the benefit of doing embodiment work, but until last Friday, I didn't even have a practice of actually doing that. So was I building the muscle? Absolutely, I wasn't, right? Even though my brain said, yep, logically, this makes sense. Check, logic sense.
Yes, and I'll just add the piece that a lot of us do the personal development work, and we do be around community. And if we're not careful, we're doing it to feel good, but we're not actually taking action. And so that keeps us stuck as well. It really comes down to that deep intention and deciding within ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Darren's got comments. You guys are blowing up the chat. Most people are not connected to their hearts, therefore disconnected to pure life passion. Yes, that's where we're getting to with this conversation. We're gonna go there. But I also just want to recognize that Sam is sharing in the comments that, well, I mean, I like that you put, Sam, I think I'm very self-aware, because I believe there's always more to explore when it comes to self-awareness. And it is a practice of knowing, like, okay, to me, something is wrong right now. And I love how you use things that are going against your personal brand. I actually used that verbiage with a business partner the other day, and I was just like, this is not in alignment with me, and I am having a emotional reaction to this. And therefore, I'm going to we have this thing where I can wave a flag. Like, I'm waving the flag on this conversation, which means the conversation is paused. And I appreciate that we need to come back to this, but it's not going to be productive for me to have this conversation right now, because I feel like now we're competing, right? Like you said this and I said this, and in my brain and in my experience, it's the exact opposite of what I would do. And therefore I need to take a break. And Amber was sharing that it took years to practice, and that there's still situations. I really like what you're saying here too, Amber, about how there's sometimes situations where you're like, oh, well, that strategy that I had created didn't actually work in this situation. And I'm a big believer in that. Like, there's no strategy that's going to work 100% of the time, so that it's always an ongoing thing. And that there's, yes, a difference, Sam, between having a voice and being respectful. But I would say, like, it's not even just about being respectful of others, which I do believe is important, but also that it's respectful of yourself, right? Like, is your voice just responding and saying, like, no, hard no, this is what I'm going to say? Or is there that opportunity to explore? Okay, I'm not saying it's not a hard no, right? But what if we take that moment to explore, why is this a hard no? Is there something I could communicate to the other person about why it's a hard no? So the next time I experience, or maybe I could even prevent such a hard no in the future, because I've learned enough about why that is that way for me and shared it with my people.
Yeah, and I'll just add in there that, when we are speaking, is it from a place of a trigger, or are we speaking from a place of like speaking out of love, where what you're saying the same thing, but with love wrapped around it. So it actually gets delivered to the other person and they receive it. And the only way to develop this is, again, to develop that love energy, that love, self-love within ourselves, to speak to ourselves kinder. And so that we can give what our heart knows is right for us, but in a way that other people can hear and receive it, and for us to feel fully received in our way. So I just want to speak to that.
Yeah. And I just feel like this is so beautiful, and another great segue back into the work environment, because I can only say from my own personal experience, but there were lots of times in my personal experience in the work environment that there would be that hard no, right? And then you're in a scenario where, like, well, I'm employed to do this, so now I have to do this just because I'm employed to, but I really don't want to. And there's not really that space. Like, again, it's not even part of the conversation, right? So if I were to say, like, hey, white flag, right? Like, I need, and like, quite honestly, in my experience, that happened to me just the other day. My experience of that is, like, I needed like a good 3 hours to, like, step away and, like, forget about the thing and then come back to it in a way where I could assess, like, what was I actually responding to in this scenario? Like, what was impacting me? And because, like, yeah, we can't do that deep dive in real time. But I think, again, these experiences happen at work, and then we don't give ourselves the time or the space to create that. So one of the things I'm thinking, Tabby, is that there's a powerful opportunity for leaders in this conversation to create these types of skills, to build these types of muscles for themselves, as part of an opportunity to create space for other people to do that. So I know you work with a lot of leaders. So what are some of the things that you have seen effective for leaders taking these types of skills back to their workplace?
Yeah, it's really, I find that a lot of the skills that are come up through someone definitely has to do with a lot of the work that we do outside of the workplace, because the deeper we go in that area, it will just naturally come up with in a very conscious way. And I find that again and again, as a leader, doing whatever you're doing, we often know the strategies and we know what to say and do. We heard about setting boundaries. And I actually think that one of the biggest skills is learning to be gentle with ourselves. And it's like, it's not that we're not going to screw up and say the wrong thing and I didn't say that right and blah, 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 right? It's actually from a place of being kind to ourselves and what happens after the fact and how that supports our bounce back and coming back as a leader, and admitting that, I actually didn't say that the way I wanted to. And let me just retry that. And I find, it's not about perfection. It's really about being our best selves, serving and coming back to this place of love within ourselves that we could then begin again. That sounds like a very simple thing, but it's very powerful, because when we feel those emotions, when we go to work every day and we don't have time to deal with it, and then we do our normal tendency of putting it down and it gets stuck in our body or whatever. But it's like allowing ourselves to actually feel in that moment. It's like, yeah, I'm actually feeling like, self-judgment around this, or I'm feeling that I didn't say that right, therefore I'm judging myself, or, that person is horrible, whatever that is happening for us. You know what I mean? It's being able to accept what's happening in the moment, and being able to have that compassion to come back to the next moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
For me, one of the things this is speaking to is like what I think society has created a narrative, like the societal narrative around leadership, historically has been really closely tied to ego, right? So like I've worked my way up and I've accomplished all these things, right? I'm like at the top of the tower, and that's really ego coming out, right? And actually, I mean, in my experience, I didn't actually even care about any of those things, right? Like I didn't care about being a senior vice president. I didn't care about the dollars in my bank account. I just wanted to do good work. I wanted to do meaningful work. It got me to this place, so that's great. But that's not the thing that's meaningful to me. Kind of going back to Darren's comment about the disconnect between work and passion in life. And it's just really interesting to me because, so fun fact for those of you who don't know, I named my ego Voldemort. So that if you're not a Harry Potter fan, you won't get it. But like Voldemort's the bad guy in Harry Potter. And so when I can tell when it's coming out and it's like separate from me, right? Like, oh, that's Voldemort. Hey, Voldemort, get out of here, right? Like, I don't want to hang out with Voldemort. But I have this really cool example. I've used it a couple of times, but it's from a personal life example. But I think it's a really great example of what you're talking about, Tammy, is when we were potty training my son, who thank God is finally potty trained, but like he didn't want anything to do with that, right? Like he was not interested in it at all. And we had this one experience one day where we're like trying to do like just plain underwear because it feels different than diapers and blah blah blah, all these theories, right? Like, yeah, you test them, some work, some don't. But I had said Nicholas was sitting on my bed playing, and I was like, hey, I need to go to the bathroom. Do you need to go to the bathroom? And he was like, nope. So I was like, okay, went to the bathroom, come back. How long does that take? 2 minutes-ish, if you're slow. And in that amount of time I came back, he had peed all over my bed. And so I like picked him up and took him to the tub, and like immediately out of my voice was like, no TV, no toys until you go pee in the potty. Right? Just the frustrated parenting thing. And as soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, I wouldn't do that, right? Like this is a kid who's learning a new skill. I wouldn't do that if he fell off his bike, right? Like, so why would I do that when he made a mistake here? And so it's just like, I think when we have those reactions, like you said, Tammy, our default just comes out, right? Like, and then you're like, wow, my default is so misaligned with who I am as a person. But we learn these things from our parents and from school and other leaders and teachers, and like, geez, we learn it from a lot of places. So it makes sense that can happen. But even having that moment, the reason why I bring up ego is that was Voldemort speaking. Right? Like, I'm in charge, listen to me, you should just do what you're told, blah, blah, blah. And like, I don't believe that. I believe I'm trying to teach him a skill. This isn't going to teach him a skill. This is going to make him afraid of things, right? Like, that's not going to help. Yes, he must not be named. But I'm not afraid using the word. He doesn't have that kind of power over me anymore. Again, if you're Harry Potter fans, you'll get that. But these are the things, right? So we can't necessarily prevent that from happening, but what we can do when practicing this muscle is notice when those things are misaligned. And then like literally as soon as I said that, I was like, that's not true. Like, Carter did it the other day too. He was mad about something and he was like, if you don't brush your teeth or whatever he was talking about, like, we're going to send you to boarding school. And I was like, this is the most empty threat you could possibly think of, right? Like, it's not even a good one because there's no way he's going to believe that. But these are the things, right? Like, we just think that's what we should do. And then we're like, well, no, I wouldn't actually do that. But in a work environment, bringing it back to the work environment,
yeah,
we get caught in those decisions a lot, right? Like we get caught in no TV, no toys until you go pee in the potty. They extrapolate it to a business scenario. And so like our ego keeps us stuck in that, like, well, now I said it, so now I gotta like honor what I said, because if I don't, I'll look like I am floofy and change my mind and all of these things. And so from a work perspective, Tammy, in that like getting uncomfortable, in the like building this muscle, what are, and I mean, honestly, I think it has to come from the leaders, but what are some things we need to show up and do to give ourselves that space and give other people that space?
Yeah, one thing I'll say, and it's like inspired by your potty training example, is exactly that. Like we make home and work life separate, but it's really not. It's like, yeah, we slip up, and it's like, depending where we are in our emotional leadership at work, it's like, oh my goodness, I just noticed I really said that really harshly, and what I'm noticing is I'm feeling angry, and I didn't come out the way I wanted to, and like just breathing in that moment. And it may be the weirdest, most uncomfortable bit of being able to say that, but you're stepping into, first of all, admitting you're wrong in that moment, stepping into courage of actually naming what you're feeling. You know, if your intention is to bring this into your environment and you want to create more vulnerability and connection in the workplace, you just did that. And being able to say, like, I actually just need a bit of space, and I want to come back, and I'll apologize. I want to like offer apology, or I want to say that again right now. You know, just simple steps like that in the moment. And I know that that could and cannot apply depending on the circumstance, but that is actually leadership. It's like, wow, and then you might need to do this more than once.
Just to confirm, you will need to do this more than once.
Yes. Because first of all, it's doing again and again, because just like saying no to someone, people don't hear it the first time. You gotta like be assertive and say it a few more times, maybe 10 or more, whatever. And in this circumstance of building your leadership of who you want to show up as and speaking from the space again and again, people, first of all, they may judge you. And it's okay.
They probably will.
Yes.
Again, just like there will, like, because you can't control everybody's journey. So somebody is probably going to misunderstand you.
Yes. Yeah. And but then you're speaking truth. And when you speak truth in the moment, no one can really take you down. They can judge you, but it's because they're uncomfortable with it. It's not about you. It's about them. But the more we show up this way, as employee and leader, like people start to realize that, oh, like they may not say it out loud, and you're not going to get this response and, oh, good job, you did it this way, and things like this. But you remember, you're doing that for you, and taking the first step is not necessarily the easy step. And then you'll start to shift the energy in the environment if you keep on doing this. And other people that are needing that leader, and there will be followers that maybe step into that as well. That's what I mean. Obviously, everything starts at the leadership level. Very, very important. But you're doing that as a leadership of your life, like setting that intention before you start the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a different intention, right? You're going into the day, into a meeting, into a task or something with, I would actually argue a lot of things we do without intention, right? We do because, again, our society has glorified doing. So we go out and we do things and we check boxes and we're like, hey, I was a productive human today, therefore I have value. But we do so little with intention, right? Like, what do I want? I was having a conversation with my friend Carol Jean Whittington. You should follow her if you don't already. About like, what type of experience do you want to have from this? We did a little video for a girls basketball team, because we're both championship basketball players. But it was about like, what do you want to experience out of this? As a leader, what do you want to experience out of this meeting? What do you want to experience out of this management meeting? What do you want to experience out of this offsite? What do you want to experience with a one-on-one with your teammate? Having that intention is so, I mean, it changes the game. It changes the game, because having an intention versus not having an intention, I actually don't think that most people's intentions are bad. I think there's a handful of people that actually have really bad intentions, but like I think most people, like 96% of people, just have no intention. They just go into it and do things. And I want to call out what Kim is saying here, but when we realize, like, maybe it's not doubt, maybe it's just realizing that we're not aligned. Oh, hey, we're not aligned in this. And I do want to call out, we got some Canadianness coming out in this answer. Right? Like, sorry for how that came out. But are you? Because like, it wasn't actually you intentionally saying that, right? Like, I would say if you're intentionally hurting someone's feelings, then yeah, maybe you should apologize for that. But I do think, especially, and not everybody listening is Canadian, but like Canadians have a default response specifically to say, I'm sorry. Right. And what we forget is that, like, sometimes I'm not sorry. Like, no, that's not what I meant. Oh, I realized I just said that. And also, that's not at all what I meant. So let me rephrase that. Or can we come back to this? Or let me try again. Right. But I feel like we have an overusage of the word sorry. And maybe it's not even like, I know it is a Canadian thing, but it is also like a heart-centered human thing. Right? We want to apologize for a thing, but then it also, I think that is connected to the doubt, right? Like, oh, I did that badly. I did that poorly, right? Like, I need to apologize for that. We don't have to apologize to it unless you had bad intentions. Just redo, mulligan. I love to say mulligan, right? It's a golf term for those of you who don't know, but it means reshot, redo, right? Erase that and try again. And there's so much power in being able to do that, but you need to have that self-awareness, the self-efficacy to be able to say, like, okay, no, I'm going to go back on that. Okay, so I want to have one more conversation just to bring this back around to open to receive, because we've talked in the last little bit a lot about like vulnerability and like art and knowing when our ego is separate from ourselves and all of these things. And in my brain, these are like key stepping stones to being open to receive. But what are some of the things, Tammy, that when we're going from, let's just go from the place where we've decided we've decided we're going to be intentional, right? We're going to decide to be intentional. We haven't built the muscle yet specifically, but what are the types of muscle building exercises do we need to do from our decision to be more intentional about giving ourselves space for vulnerability, self-love, self-care, all of these things, to the place where we actually have the opportunity to become open to receive?
Well, in my definition of open to receive, doing all those things are ways of opening to receive. Because actually, when we set an intention, we're actually going creating a different reality that's different from the default. And in doing that and realizing the intention of even setting an intention, that is open to receive. And once we set the intention and we move forward, it's being and it looks scary, like what I said around, like, speaking up into the space of what you did and being that vulnerability. That is actually opening to receive, because it doesn't feel like it, but we kind of have to remove what's in the way of the protection that we have in the way of actually allowing us to even let go of that, so the new connection could be born, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so from that place, it's maybe it looks like making a different decision in your day, where you're actually creating space in your day for yourself to actually receive more of whatever is that you need at that moment. And so it really is, how I see this, it's actually filtered through everything I'm saying, but also tangibly it's creating space for ourselves. But also sometimes that space is taking action to leave the workplace or ask for some different assignment, whatever that is. Those are all steps of opening to receive. But it's when we're not conscious and in the energy and beingness of even having the intention to do that. None of this is possible. And so I know it doesn't sound very tangible what I'm saying, but I just want to highlight that fact that all these pieces, it's that intention of allowing yourself to receive and creating this in your environment, whatever that looks like for you. Does that make sense, Tracy? Like,
I mean, I expected that was where you're going with the question. I'm like one of those lawyers that just like asks leading questions all the time, assuming I know where you're going to go with it. But and this is the point. So I'll ask you one more simple question, Tammy.
mm-hmm.
Without those things, from a business perspective, whether that's open to receiving money, open to receiving a promotion, open to receiving a job offer, open to receiving accolades, right? Open from even like, I believe a business is a combination of all the people who it encapsulates. And so as a business being profitable, is that something you can possibly be open to receiving without taking these, I love how you said energy and beingness, without taking the energy and beingness steps?
Well, and I believe this is it, is that a lot of us are going, like wanting to create, the difference or the abundance in our life and to open to receive it to some extent. But this is what we don't know, is that within ourselves, all these things I'm talking about, and it goes layers deep, is what is potentially subconsciously pushing it away. And so it is like when we allow to remove what these blocks or beingness ways of like relating to ourselves, the old way of being with ourselves, whether that's like anger, self-doubt we brought about, or like just doing the action of over pleasing or anything along that line, right? That is what's in the way of, we got to take that out in order to actually shift our beingness in opening to receive. And so I will say here that everything is energy. And so I think of it that way, is it really comes down to everything we're doing that day. Even though we set the intention, what is the energy we're bringing? What's the essence we're bringing? Because that is what it's going to open us up to actually let things in to receive, whether that's impact, money, connection, relationships. And yeah, that if we just look at everything in that way, it's like, what is my energy like today? Am I feeling tightness in my body? Am I experiencing a headache? Am I having lower back pain? Are my shoulders like all tense? Because if that's the case, it's actually a good sense that we may not be opening to receive, because we're holding everything in. And in contraction, literally in our bodies and in our energy, we're actually not opening to receive. And I think this is what goes wrong, is that people are not connected to the body necessarily. And just a simple thing that people can do is like, when you're moving out through the day, like, do you notice that your shoulders are sort of rounded forward? Like, that's a simple thing to know that you're sort of like feeling maybe fear or discomfort, and you're not even having your body position open. It sounds very simple, but these are things that these subconscious blocks at another level within ourselves actually cause our body to take a different shapes and forms and experience, like pain or discomfort in the body. It's all our body talking to us. And so at a deep level, open to receive. And I actually, in my program, Tracy has experienced this, is I let people see, like, to say that, like, for example, if they want more money or they want loving relationships, and I actually test their energy field. And even though I've seen so many people that feel like, yeah, I'm totally, I'm par for that. I'm doing all the actions and everything, and their energy is pushing it away. And it's very visibly seen in that sort of exercise. But without doing an energy exercise, our body is a really good indicator of if we're open to receive. So
for one, because Tammy mentioned that, for those of you who are not in your business peeps, Tammy has done this energy thing within the community before, and she can do it digitally, like through the computer. It's pretty cool. I highly recommend, like, talk to Tammy. Do it. It's neat. Or join your business peeps and you can get in on the next one. There's one of the other things I just want to come back to, Cam. I want to appreciate everybody who's in the chat here. Debbie, yes. We got all the Canadians here talking about how Sorry. Hashtag sorry, not sorry. Amber, not Canadian, but also used to apologize for everything. But I love what she's saying here about realizing why you're apologizing instead of just by default apologizing it as part of the language. She's also celebrating, addressing why am I not worthy of receiving this? It's a good question, right? Like one of the questions that Kira Day, who's over at Passion Break, always says is like, why do I not want this? Right? So if like I'm not getting a thing, like what is it in me that doesn't want this? And can you find some answers within yourself? And heck yes, Sam, we put up our own barriers. And this is where I want to bring this full circle back to the why is this relevant for a business as well? Because if your business is full of people who show up putting up barriers every day, you think that is the path to achieve an abundant P&L? Because it's not, right? Like it's not a thing. If your leaders are showing up with barriers, if your experts are showing up with barriers, and especially if the barriers are things that have been created by the system and the structure that you've built your business on, we are intentionally bringing humans who can't function that way, well, definitely can't function optimally that way, into an organization that won't support them. So if you're talking about human potential optimization, we just talk about putting up barriers. We just shut the door in the face of all of our human potential optimization because why? And it's worth exploring. Yeah, what about leadership putting up barriers? That is an episode for another day because we are already out of time for today. But before we leave, Tammy, one of the things I want, so Tammy mentioned her Open to Receive program. It's actually kicking off next week. Can you give everybody a little bit more information about like what does that look like from an individual perspective and working through your Open to Receiveness?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll definitely share about it. It's starting next Wednesday, March 1st. And I love it because my whole intention of creating it is to help people create this impact and abundance, make that difference with more balance and ease, fueled by the power of self-love. And that may sound kind of non-tangible, but it gets really tangible because I have a nursing background and I definitely have structure to it. So don't you worry. But my intention is really to help someone identify and release what's in the way of creating what you want energetically, right? And also at a mind level and any limiting beliefs and things like that. It's about bringing the body, mind, heart, soul together. It's not looking at one piece of you and trying to fix that. It's an integration of all parts of you, right? And it's a place where you're going to receive like a roadmap for how to transform your emotional triggers into more opportunities and love energy to shift your beingness in that and actually start giving yourself what you need to start addressing that. And of course, creating that personal self-care plan and shifting, raising your vibration so that you could create something different in your reality. All the circumstances and leaders that we're working for is circumstances outside of us, even though it feels like it's something that is happening to us. It's coming back to this power within ourselves. And that's what I'm supporting people in stepping into. And lastly, of course, because I'm a body whisperer, it's discovering what your body is saying and start embodying that transformation that I'm going to walk you through. And so this is what I'm putting together as it's a weekly coaching program. And there's also some one-to-one attached. So if you're interested, please reach out and I'd love to have a conversation with you.
Yes, please do. And I will be there, just so everyone knows. I'm going to be participating in the Open to Receive program. Super excited about it. Sam, I also agree. This brings a whole new look to accessibility, right? And this is the point. For those of you who have been watching this show for a while, hopefully what you're realizing here is that human optimization equals business optimization, right? And this is not about giving people an afternoon off to go have a bubble bath, right? This is about having the real conversations that matter in turning individual humans into beings that can be open to receive so that your company can be open to receive all of the amazing things that it has the potential to achieve. But all of these things happen on the backs of people, right? And if it's happening on the backs of the people and the people are lying flat on the ground being squished, they can barely breathe, which happens a lot of the time. You You can't achieve those kinds of things. So this is about getting your people to the place where they can do that. And if you are a leader of people and you're listening to this conversation back and you're like, wow, maybe I never show up with any vulnerability. That's a limitation for your open to receive. That's a limitation for your business success. It's a limitation for your career success. So this isn't about imposing, no more self-imposed barriers, right? At the end of the day, it's nice if a business can be like, yeah, we talk about these things. These are the things that are important. But at the end of the day, if we're not doing the thing as individual people, it doesn't matter who's creating spaces and where. We have to take that ownership and say, like, yeah, okay, I can see how I might be creating these boundaries for myself. And how can I get from a place where, like, I'm literally terrified to receive a compliment to a place where I'm like open to receiving that, because there's an open to receive muscle, folks. And this is about practicing your open to receive muscle. So all of us want to receive different things, right? Like, it's not about you decide what you want to be open to receiving, but this is about making sure that we're not self-imposing those limitations on ourselves. So Tammy, where's the best place for people to find you and connect with you if they want to learn more about the program, or if they just want to learn more about emotional leadership and open to receivingness in general?
Yeah, I'll put like a link in the chat if you sort of want to have a conversation around that. I'll also put my email if you want to just reach out and connect. Yeah, maybe I'll sort of put in there sort of this get calm and energized meditation if that's something that will support you because you're in a place of too much stress and you kind of have to come back to self. I'd love to just offer that to the audience as well. So.
Oh, that's awesome. So stay tuned in the chat for all of those resources after we are done, because we are way over today. Oh, well, this is what happens with good conversations. Yes. And for those of you, I saw a couple of people kind of like connecting in the chat, having a conversation. If you folks are not connected with each other, I encourage you to connect with each other, because this conversation, like every conversation, helps build a muscle. But this is like coming in, doing one workout, and then never going back to your Peloton again, right? So let's not do that. Well, I mean, you can do what you want with your Peloton if you have one or don't. But if this is something that's important to you, this ability for you to be open to receive love, opportunities, all of these things, stay in the conversation. Stay in the conversation with Tammy. Stay in the conversation with me. Stay in the conversation with each other. These are people who are also all about having this conversation. And maybe you even find an accountability partner in there that can help you move through the journey, which is always very helpful. So connect with each other and stay in the conversation, because staying in the conversation is what builds that muscle. And I'm going to stop talking because I will just keep talking because I love this topic too much. We will be back next week at the same time for another conversation about how we can think about people things so that we can do something different on a business front. And until then, to all of you, permission to do you. Good afternoon, my friends.
Bye.